So a new year has come and gone quite a while ago because we're in February now, but I did want to talk about my favourite games of the previous year, 2018. And in terms of gaming overall, I think it was pretty decent. I don't think it was ever going to really hold a candle to 2017, which had like Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade 2, all fantastic games. But we did get some good ones, and I do want to talk about them today, so let's have a look at them right now. Before we begin, there's a couple things you should know. For starters, my primary and only consoles currently are Nintendo ones, so that means I don't have a PS4, so I've not been able to play the games like Spider-Man, God of War, and Red Dead Redemption 2 in the past year. I do have an exception to these, but apart from that, don't expect to see games that came out exclusively on other systems on this list. And secondly, there's no rules. Usually with lists like this, I see like no remakes or no more than one of the same franchise or something like that to keep things interesting. I'm not really going to do that. I just want to talk about the games that were my favourites this year, whether they're in the same genre or franchise or anything like that. So there's no rules. These are just my favourite games as they are. But before we look at those, let's look at a few honourable mentions that didn't make the top 5. Now this one would have most definitely made the actual list if I'd finished it in time before this video. Dragon Quest XI is an absolutely fantastic game from the legendary RPG series. I only got into Dragon Quest in 2017 with the release of Dragon Quest VIII on the 3DS, but since then I've been unbearably in love with the franchise, playing 5 and 6 immediately after, with 4, 7 and 9 still to go, which I can't wait to get round to. Before that though, Dragon Quest XI came out on a console that I didn't own, but my housemate did, and we decided to get it and play through it together. Which has been a different experience playing an RPG, but it's been a great time all the same. It's also been the reason why we haven't finished it yet, since we don't get much time to sit down and play it together. But whenever we have, we've just fallen in love with the world and the characters. Akira Toriyama's designs for these characters and monsters are just so charming it hurts. To dedicate this, I actually got the illustrations book that recently released too. It's beautiful and definitely recommended. I'm only 30 hours in, but I've already been sold. This time you're the prodigal child, the Luminary, says to defeat the oncoming evil of the world and restore peace. A simple concept like every Dragon Quest game, but the insane amount of charm, humour and just feel-good nature of the adventure makes it just so much fun to play. I've always said Dragon Quest feels like the light-hearted counterpart to Final Fantasy. I don't think I've ever not had a smile on my face while playing this series, and this game too. Of course, take this opinion with a grain of salt because it could go downhill from here, but right now it's a gorgeous game that is an absolute joy. It's retained its classic simple gameplay that has survived throughout the years, when other series have had to jump the shark a bit to stay relevant. I'm also super excited about the Switch version coming later this year too. It seems to be the definitive version of the game, adding back in the 16-bit style that was in the 3DS version, which I was gutted was removed from console releases. It also has an optional orchestrated soundtrack and much more, so I'm more than ready to experience it all again already, and I haven't even finished it yet. The newest game in the Legendary series is the only fighting game other than Smash that I've actually gotten into on a level past casual enjoyment, and it's been a blast learning it all. I first started playing it with my housemate earlier in 2018 when it was released on the PS4, then I picked it up myself when it released on Switch. For £50 I wasn't happy about that. I've seen this game get more casual fighting game fans into the competitive scene, and that's nothing but a good thing. It makes excellent work for the Dragon Ball name too, with a fitting soundtrack and drop-dead gorgeous visuals that look like the actual show. From what I'm told, each character's move is pulled from something they did in the actual anime, which is insane that they've managed to add that much character to a pretty sizable roster, even before DLC. As to be expected though, it is kind of disappointing how many versions of the same character there is. This is Dragon Ball, I'm sure there's a more interesting character to put in the game than another Goku. Also not a fan of the continued trend of companies taking big advantage for how important characters are in fighting games, and putting in more around £5 a pop. Fighting games are especially prone to this right now, and I really hope the business practice stops soon. It's getting to the point where if I had a choice of having them as DLC or not at all, I'd rather just not have them at all. Following that, the single player content unfortunately is not very good, and it does bring the game down a peg. Arcade mode is complete bullshit. It just beefs up your opponent's health and lets them take 3/4 of yours with one level 3. They're all essentially walking nukes and it's not fun, especially on the harder difficulties. The story mode, which to its credit does have an original story about a new android called 21 who was out to eat the world, it's just uninteresting. It's a chore and really just not worth your time unless you want to unlock 21 as a fighter, which somehow my housemate did without beating the story. How? It's essentially just mowing down clones of characters and having a few voice cutscenes here and there, and while the voice acting is on point from the usual Funimation crew, and Japanese voices too, it's just so boring that I must have skipped about 90% of them by the end. Luckily the actual meat of the game though, the multiplayer, that carries the game for sure. It's been an absolute blast, and my online experience has been decent for the most part too. Performance has been fine, but finding a match on a normal search system has had me waiting forever just for it to tell me a match can't be found. Now, to be fair, I do think that's unfortunately a consequence of playing on the Switch, because there isn't that many people about, so I've had to resort to setting up my own lobbies near the match search arena in the main lobby to try and catch people's attention. I feel like a beggar in the streets.
Spare change, ma'am.
I do just want to quickly mention WarioWare Gold. I haven't really got a way of getting footage for it, but just know that out of all the honourable mentions, this was the closest to making the top 5. It's an absolutely fantastic game, definitely my favourite in the series, and it's nice that the 3DS's last original first party game was definitely a banger. Katamari is a game that I've heard about for years, and I've been curious to play it, but not to the level that I was going to go out and find a copy. Luckily, it's had a facelift in the form of Katamari Damacy Reroll, taking the original game and visually updating it, and if there's anything this game accentuates, it's bizarre charm. The crazy things you see in this game just make you point and laugh. When you see the game's opening, you have no idea what you're in for. You're essentially pushing around a ball that objects in the world stick to, snowballing it from picking up batteries on a table to rolling over cars and houses. It's incredibly novel and unique. Just seeing how you go from one extreme to the other is the game's biggest strength. You can also view every single item you can collect, big or small. There's also secret presents to find to customise the little prince here. The soundtrack is also incredibly infectious, with some genuinely catchy tunes. Like with Dragon Quest, I was never left without a smile. The plug-in look also gives the game a toy box aesthetic, which is very fitting because that's pretty much what the King of Cosmos is telling you what Earth is. With how bizarre everything else is in the game, the controls are no different, and it will take some time to get used to. You use the 2 analog sticks as almost one, meaning it can feel pretty clunky to turn around and move sometimes. But I think that was purposely done, and with how wacky the physics can be, it all comes together to create an insanely fun time. It's one of those games where the concept almost carries it alone, but it's got great gameplay, visuals, and music to go along with it. You really don't want to miss out on this one. Getting to the actual list, at number 5, we've got my childhood in a game card, and that is the Crash Bandicoot N-Sane trilogy. Crash 1 on the PS1 was the first console game that I ever played on the first console that I ever owned, and I've played it so many times that I was ever to speedrun a game, it'll probably be that one. Crash 2 and 3 I didn't play until around 7 years ago, but they were both fantastic too, and playing them all again with drop dead gorgeous visuals was one of the best gaming experiences I had in 2018. The controls were tweaked in the first game to feel more like the second and third, so it did throw off my jumps a bit, but I appreciated the attempt at more consistent controls throughout the whole trilogy. They also made it less of a pain to 100% in the first game, making it so you no longer need to beat a level with all the crates broken and not having died. Now those are only restricted to the coloured gemmed levels, so it keeps a ridiculous challenge but not on the scale it was before. The soundtrack also got a jazzed up remake, and while I do like it, with many of the songs being flat out better than the original, I do think some missed the mark, like the Dark Ruin levels in Crash 1. It sort of changed the atmosphere of the level because of the faster tempo and more instruments. It does still sound great, I just don't think it fits the level as good as the original did. But on the other hand, the Embryo boss theme is just so much better. It has this electric guitar and synth combo that it really nails the action, and that's one of the things that the remade soundtrack does a bit better, is the action sort of levels and boss fights, whereas the original does the atmospheric levels a lot better. I really do feel that these games have aged remarkably well, and I think it's due to the corridor design. What I mean is, this is essentially a 3D platformer that plays like a 2D one, forcing you to head in a linear path in a tight area. It's not a bad thing at all, and if anything, this game proves that simple design like this still has a place in games, even in today's industry. Hell, one of the best things about this package is the fact Stormy Ascent, a cut level from the first game and a brand new level called Future Tense, have been added. A brand new level in 2018 in the style of 1996 Crash. That's just fantastic, and I hope this sets the precedent for a possible Crash 4. and I really want to give it to Vicarious Visions if they do end up making a sequel, because they have absolutely nailed this package. Now number 4 is possibly the biggest surprise to me this year, and to be honest probably deserves to be higher when I think about how much I loved it. It's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. This just absolutely blew me away. I went into this game expecting to have a decent amount of fun with it because of the reception I'd seen it get since it released on the Wii U, but I've been skeptical of 2D platformers since the market has just become absolutely flooded with them. That and the fact that the most recent 2D platformers I played, bar Sonic Mania, were the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and those really are quite bland, so it gave me this illusion that 2D platformers just didn't offer much. Then I played this masterpiece, and sweet lord, everything about this game is 10 out of 10, V5 out of V5. The level design is amazing with the cohesive environment shifting around beautifully as the level progresses, and DK feels incredible to control. His weight and momentum is absolutely spot on, and the presentation, oh my god. It's just on another level. Now graphically, yes, the game has those very safe Wii U era visuals that Nintendo used in a lot of their games, but Tropical Freeze really excels in its art direction and especially its music. Some of these levels are just breathtaking to look at. Cold Arctic wastelands, jungle fruit factories and burning African plains. Almost something ripped straight out of Lion King with beautiful backgrounds that brilliantly come to life. The music though. I've heard how good Donkey Kong Country music is, hell I've heard some of it in Smash, but after playing this I can without a doubt say the composers are actual geniuses. I can't even think of words to give it justice, so let's just give it a listen. What I thought was going to be a simple platformer was a brilliant, challenging musical marvel, and it's so hard not putting this any higher, but I guess 2018 spoiled me. There's also collectibles to get by finding the Kong letters, which unlock a difficult level in each area. It's the most fulfilling platforming challenge I've had since Crash for sure, which this game reminds me of in more ways than one. The tropical setting really reminds me of the setting in Crash 1, which I think made me love tropical areas in games in general, like Hoenn in Pokemon for instance. There's also puzzle pieces to find to unlock concept art too, which usually I'm not too fussed about, but it's just so much fun to find these things. Plus the art is beautiful. I actually got Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D for Christmas, and I'm about halfway through and it's just more of what I loved about Tropical Freeze. Well, minus the great David Wise's soundtrack, but I cannot wait to go back and try the original trilogy. However, Tropical Freeze will always be special to me, and that's why it's at number 4 on this list. At number 3 was a very important game for the Switch last year, and that is Octopath Traveler. A third-party exclusive that honestly really carried the mid-year. There really wasn't much on the Switch around that time, and Octopath filled the gap and then some. I first saw the game at the Nintendo Switch Reveal Direct at the start of 2017, and straight away I was interested in Octopath. It's one of the most unique looking games I've ever seen, using 2D sprites but with a tad bit of depth to make them look 3D in a 3D environment, but the environment is also sprites. Whatever it is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm not usually pulled in solely on a game's visuals. Octopath Traveler is an RPG where you play as 8 different characters, each on their own journey, picking up the other characters along the way. For example, you could start off with the Thief Varian, and then decide to head to Cobblestone to get the warrior Alberic. Each character has their own individual story, and because of that the party doesn't really feel like a party until later in the game when you interact with each other, in what is similar to support conversations of Fire Emblem. But in the normal story cutscenes, they don't interact. It's both a blessing and a curse really, since you really connect with whatever character's chapter it is, but you also don't get much camaraderie between the cast until after the moment is gone. Now I think one of the biggest barriers to RPGs is the fact a lot of them have slow starts, and although Octopath's start isn't necessarily slow, since each character jumps right into their own story, every character's first chapter is pretty repetitive. I'll say not helping is the fact that I turn voice acting off, and while I hear it's decent, it honestly just looks weird to me seeing these sprites speaking.
To Sir Albrecht's side, men! The blackguards have had their way for long enough!
Not to mention sometimes they make grunts instead of speaking their line. It's a bit jarring, but apart from the voice acting, all of the issues I have are alleviated in the chapters after one, because even though each chapter follows the same formula, the stories do get interesting and engaging for every character, and they all end in a satisfying way. Now at this point I am going to mention some spoilers, so skip ahead to this point in the video to avoid those bad boys. So after you beat everyone's chapter, there are still some loose threads to tie up, and after doing some certain side quests you can access the final area, where a massive plot dump awaits you explaining how everyone's stories are interconnected, with a beautiful piece of music playing in the background. I originally attempted to explain what made this so impactful for me, but I honestly can't do it justice. Just know that this is what bumped the game into the top 3 for me. Unfortunately, what stopped it going any higher is the ridiculous final boss, which is far too strong compared to everything else in the game. Not to mention the boss rush before it, which you can't even save after, making the whole thing even more bothersome. It made me not able to technically beat the game, and it left quite a sour taste in my mouth. But regardless of which, Octopath was an absolute joy. The characters, visuals, combat and music are all incredible. I didn't even really make mention of the soundtrack really, but it is absolutely amazing. The Frostlands, Indecisive Battle 2 and Gated Finish being my personal highlights, but everything else in the soundtrack was absolutely spot on and really fitted with the game's aesthetic overall. It was incredible. In second place is a bit of a cheat, but it's Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna the Golden Country. This one's technically a DLC expansion to the original game, but it was so big that it had its own release, so I'm classing it more as a side game instead of pure DLC. At least that's what I'm going with, so I can get Xenoblade on the list because I love Xenoblade. That being said, holy god, this delivered on everything I could have wanted on an expansion of the Aegis War. An important event in the main game that is definitely explained there, but here you get to experience the event itself. For those who don't know, the Aegis War is an important conflict to Xenoblade 2's story that is set 500 years before the events of the main game. Quite a few of the characters in 2 are here in Torna as well, so it's really nice to see the characters develop here to how they are in 2. They especially did a great job with Mithra, and with how much I love the characters in 2, just experiencing more of their stories is a true treat.
You? What the hell? She's our enemy!
Adam plainly ordered you to stop, or didn't you hear him, simpleton?
I'm a sucker for interesting lore, and the Xeno games have that in spades. There are tons of foreshadowing into the main game, and if you've already played the main game before this, which I recommend, then you'll get so much more out of it. That being said, you can play this without playing the main game, but remember that it doesn't close out everyone's stories here. All that will be gone over in the central adventure. I actually replayed 2 not long after finishing Torna, and it made the replay experience just even better. Just knowing certain things that you didn't before and making the connections here and there. It's like having the knowledge of a director's commentary on a film and changing the way you see certain scenes. One thing that surprised me was that I thought this would be Adam and Mithra's game, considering that Adam is a hero who's practically worshipped in the main game, but it's more about the relationship between Laura and Jin, which was a brilliant choice because that's one of the pillars of Xenoblade 2's story that we know all about in the main game, but here you get to see their interactions with each other and see how much they care for one another. As always too, the character interactions in general are definitely up to Xenoblade's high standard. This series always delivers on character building and great camaraderie between everyone. There are gameplay changes too, like the battle system, which is perfectly explained by the game's story as to why it's different, and it makes sense too, which engrosses you into this beautiful world even more. Torna is probably the entire game's best designed Titan, reminding me a lot more of the Titans from Xenoblade 1, which you could tell where you were on the Titan just from looking at the Titan itself. Something I appreciated from a more concise story too was that now that field actions that made Xenoblade 2 a micromanagement hell at times is completely gone. Now because the blades you get in this game are your only blades, field actions are determined entirely by progress in the story, and doesn't require you to pass weird stipulations to gain the field skill, or have to sit there bonding with new blades until you find one with the skill you want. The only real downside I found about the game was the progress barriers the game puts up. Essentially, if you haven't done enough side quests, you won't be able to continue in the story, and while I found the side quest in Torna to be fantastic, shoutouts to the cooking competition one, I do think having them to be required without informing the player beforehand is not a good move. You might find yourself having to grind quests because you didn't do any, and just try to blast through the story. The first barrier isn't too bad, but the second one does require quite a lot of quests, and it is close to the end of the game. When DLC for Xenoblade 2 was first announced, I was not happy at all. I still don't like the way Nintendo dripped out content slowly. They should have just released it all at once if they wanted to do DLC. But I could not have been more wrong if the end result was getting essentially another Xenoblade game. A shorter one for sure, clocking around 15-20 hours, but a brilliant one all the same. Great voice acting, great choreography, yet again a fantastic soundtrack of course, with a lot of the music on the main game, but a surprising amount of new compositions here, my personal favourite being the Torn and Capital at Night. There's tons of content here, and it's just more of what makes Xenoblade 2 my favourite game of all time. This is how you do a story expansion Breath of the Wild. And at number 1 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I have a bit of a weird perspective on this game as I play both casually and competitively, but I'll split it into two. So this is the game I've been waiting for all year. I can't remember the last time I was so excited so far in advance for a video game, and boy is it delivered. A fighting game with 74 characters at launch is absolutely unheard of these days. It's 20 characters with 3 seasons of DLC, and I absolutely despise that business practice. So for this to be a reality, already ticked most of my boxes. Of course, a lot of them are similar to past iterations of the characters, but a lot of them have been given new moves and been tweaked here and there. There's also the stages, and there's over 100 of these shits now. I don't even think I've played them all yet. There's even more Pokemon and Assist trophies than ever, adding even more variety to the game franchise is represented, which does lead me on to the modes of the game. We'll start with the brand new mode World of Light, in which every fighter in Smash has been turned into shadow versions of themselves except Kirby. The premise kind of reminded me of Fighter's story, which is definitely a red flag, and unfortunately World of Light carries a lot of the same issues as that story does. It's just so repetitive. At least here though, it's cool exploring the world map and entering different areas representative of that character that you need to unlock in that area. Like Captain Falcon being on a racetrack or Ryu being hid away in a Street Fighter stage selection screen. So there are a lot of things to mix things up, which comes from spirits. These spirits from tons and tons of different games will give their fighter extra attributes and affect the battle in some way. Some of these fights can be absolute bullshit like the Pauline and Dr. Wily ones. But they're goofy fun, and to be honest, that's what I find World of Light. Goofy fun, nothing to be taken too seriously. If you do and you try to grind this mode, you will not have a good time. I usually can play for around 20 minutes at a time, and I have a decent amount of fun. There's also shops and dojos to find to level up your fighter's attributes, and also an RPG-like skill tree to add even more depth. I, however, didn't really care for these features. They seem pretty ineligible to me, and I didn't really fancy dicking around in menus in a mode that doesn't get that amount of engagement from me. So overall, World of Light is alright with some cool ideas, but it does really fall flat. It could have probably been fixed with some really cool cutscenes like the intro one, but no. The only other single player mode in the game is Classic Mode, and luckily this is probably the best Classic Mode has ever been. Gone is the fluff from the Wii U version, and back is the straightforward fight-to-fight action from previous games, with each character having a customised path relating to their character or series. For 74 characters, that's pretty awesome. They did get rid of ending movies for a simple picture though, which sucks. Unfortunately though, that's pretty much it. At least right now, the mini-games from previous entries are nowhere to be seen. Target Break, Home Run Contest, all that cool flavour stuff is completely gone. Even All-Star Mode's been completely ruined by essentially turning it into a 100-man Smash, except it's 74 instead. A big shame. And if I'm honest, a lot of the game outside the actual gameplay itself has lost a lot of its character and charm. There's no trophies with spirits placed in them, with Sakurai saying trophies would have just been too much work for the game, which I do understand. It did get a bit ridiculous in Wii U and 3DS, but could they have at least given the spirits some descriptions of fun flavour text like the trophies had? There's no flavour stuff out here to be found at all. No stage builder, no coin launcher or trophy rush alternative. For the ultimate game in the series, there's honestly a surprising amount of staples of the series missing from the game. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much because really there is just so much here if you look at the main mode, Smash, and it's fantastic. But unfortunately, everything outside the main mode itself is disappointingly barren, and I do think it will hurt the longevity of the game from a single player standpoint. I'll go as far as to say Ultimate is the best multiplayer in the series, but the weakest single player, excluding 64. Luckily though, the game itself is better than it's ever been. I'm going to go slightly into competitive territory here, but I love the new dash cancel mechanic. I love the new air dodges, it just feels great to play, and if a game is fun and keeps you wanting to come back every time, I definitely can overlook some modes not being here that realistically I wasn't going to play much, but it would have been nice if they were there anyway. And to be fair, if the charm from the stuff outside of the gameplay has been more sparse, then the stuff inside has never had more love and detail put into it. There's just so many Easter eggs to list, but Pit shouting "I never learned how to read" when he dies is fantastic, as is the recently released Piranha Plant attacking you when you jump on him when he's crouching in its flower pot. No one gets character charm like Masahiro Sakurai. I do just want to touch on New Online and exclaim how awful it is. Now for some reason Ultimate has an insane amount of buffer built into its engine. For those who don't know what buffer is, it's essentially when the game stores an input to be used after an input that is already active. For example, if you use Mario F Smash, then in the middle of the animation you use jab, the buffer will store that jab and use it in the first frame it can after the forward smash. Unfortunately, the buffer is so big in this game that it will make you perform accidental attacks quite often. Now this isn't a deal breaker, but online it gets so much worse, so naturally even with a good connection the game still plays so differently. Not helping is the awful quick play mode, which lets you set what rules you want to play, but might just drop you into a 1v1 if you wanted a 4-player free-for-all or vice versa. What's even more absurd is that the ranking system, GSP, is going to be used to balance the characters in the game, and 4-player item matches affect your GSP. Whose idea was that? Smash 4's online system was already garbage, but somehow they've made it even worse. I will say though, I do like arenas. For the first time you can now see your own lobbies with a nice arena menu. Again though, this is major issues that need addressing. The main one being that if you want to switch character or stage, or even the music being played in the arena, you're removed from the stadium and sent back to the back of the line. Why it does this I don't know, but it's super annoying and something that could easily be fixed. Online in general leaves a lot to be desired, for competitive anyway. For casual, I think the menu and quick play functions still need addressing, but performance wise, it plays great. Saying all that though, Smash has been a big part of my life for around 4 years now, and Ultimate has not only been my favourite game this year, but will promise of great times to come. Superb gameplay, a crazy amount of love and care woven into every pixel, and a soundtrack that is honestly otherworldly. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is my game of the year. So those are my favourite games of last year, and with how well the Switch is doing, I'm looking forward to how this year goes as well. It's going to be quite interesting to see what games I look at this time next year instead. Well, if I do the video a bit earlier. I gotta say though, I think I might have found my favourite already. Until next time.